Just like to welcome everyone back for the closing of the closing session. Thank you. Maybe while we're just sitting down, I'll briefly introduce myself. I think over the last 4 years you won't have seen me in your meetings. I recently joined as resident coordinator and resident representative UNDP in Montenegro. And I have to admit my background is also as an urban planner, so I'm much more familiar talking about gender mainstreaming to do with land, housing, architects and roads than I am to do with military issues. However, there are many of the same issues, and changing institutions is quite similar across different themes and subject areas. So I've had a very interesting day today, learning of what has been going on in the program, and I also have the honor and responsibility of summarizing and putting together the closing session. But I'm very lucky to have with me some excellent help in the form of Tanja Višacki. She's a psychologist and researcher who's done strategic work in the Ministry of Defense for Serbia, and also was very instrumental in the training of trainers with the Nordic Centre, and also the networks of gender training. I think she also was author of the gender manual. So she will be summarizing the first session that we have today. Also with me today on the panel is Bharati Sadasivam. She's the gender practice leader in Istanbul, UNDP hub. She's got a background as a journalist in civil society and also in many areas of policy development for gender in New York and also in the region. I also have Nadia Drobnjak. She's, we're familiar with each other. She's from Montenegro, and she's a member of parliament for Montenegro, and also head of the Gender Equity Office in the government of Montenegro. She's been very involved in the gender coaching program to do with the SEESAC initiative. I'm going to pass over to Bojana Balon. You will be very familiar with her. She's been one of your senior coordinators over this 4-year period, and she'll be here today and she'll talk a little bit about some of the ideas to take things further. I've also been taken the program a little bit further, and I've asked Mariette Sherman to join us again on the panel, because I think her words in reflecting from the keynote speech this morning back to today and this afternoon will be very helpful in wrapping up. So I'm going to just look at my watch and keep an eye on the time, and really leave the program to yourselves and also to the participants to ask questions when we can. So let's start with a rapid summary of what we saw in the first session, which was about gender awareness in the military. Thank you, Tatiana.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in Serbian language. Dakle, meni je pripala ta čast i privilegija da sumiram ono što su rekli učesnici i učesnice prvog panela. Ono što bih ja zaključila jeste da imamo jednu jaku regionalnu mrežu instruktora, da tu mrežu instruktora čine osobe koje su pre svega dobro selektovane, jer smo se vodili jasnim kriterijumima prilikom njihove selekcije. Takođe, oni su visoko motivisane osobe i dobro su obučeni. Mislim da je nije samo specifičnost govornika prvog panela, već se to nekako provlačilo i kroz govore učesnika drugih panela, ali jeste da bismo bili uspešni u ovom poslu i uspešno obavljali ove zadatke, mislim da je negde bilo potrebno da u stvari pre svega radimo na sebi samima. Da mi sami prepakujemo neke stavove, neke pretpostavke, neka očekivanja, a onda da prenosimo određena znanja drugima. I mislim da upravo u tome leži sva ozbiljnost, ali i atraktivnost ovog poverenog zadatka koji smo preuzeli. Regionalni sastanci su predstavljali odličan način pružanja podrške instruktorima. Regionalni sastanci su se odvijali u jednoj atmosferi poverenja i prijateljstva, što mislim da je izuzetno značajno, jer je zaista to obezbedilo razmenu koja je bila iskrena, intenzivna i izuzetno korisna. Postoji svest o potrebi stalnog unapređenja kapaciteta znanja i sposobnosti instruktora, jer sistem odbrane je sistem koji je živ sistem, koji se menja. I kako se menja praksa, tako se menjaju i pitanja na koje je potrebno odgovoriti. Upravo zbog toga potrebno je ići u korak sa tim potrebama sistema i osnaživati kapacitete samih instruktora koji na te potrebe moraju da odgovore. U tom osnaživanju dobro je da se oslanjamo na naše regionalne partnere, ali i na partnere iz Švedske, iz Norveške i Španije. Ono što je još zaključak ovog panela jeste da se od sporadičnih obuka u stvari došlo do njihove institucionalizacije, da su sve 4 zemlje regiona uspešno implementirale u planove i programe obuka ove obuke. I što je u stvari zaključak negde, da imamo dobar temelj, a dobar temelj predstavlja institucionalna podrška i rodno senzitivne politike. Zaključak je dakle da je formiran jedan održiv mehanizam, to su instruktori, koji nije zadužen samo za obuke, već je zadužen za to da kroz svoj svakodnevni rad promoviše rodnu ravnopravnost i implementira u svom svakodnevnom radu rodnu perspektivu. I negde je još zaključak da je to u stvari, da smo mi u jednom procesu, da smo poodmakli od samog početka, ali da smo isto tako još uvek daleko od nekog kraja. Svakako da je u tom procesu neophodno sprovoditi rodne analize, da bismo negde stalno proveravali dokle smo stigli i da bismo to unapređivali. Postoji ogromna motivisanost i dobra volja i potreba da se ovakva okupljanja na regionalnom nivou i ovakve razmene nastave i to će se sigurno i raditi jer postoje prosto i memorandumi o saradnji između zemalja, ali sigurno da bi uz nastavak pomoći i podrške UNDP SEESAC to bilo znatno lakše i jednostavnije. I na samom kraju moram lično da kažem da sam ja sama ponosna što sam bila deo ovog projekta i hvala vam na tome što ste mi to omogućili. Hvala.
Thank you, Tatiana. And now, Bharati, maybe you could say something about the second panel and the strengthening gender equality mechanisms.
Thank you. Thank you, Fiona. This was a really excellent panel with very interesting and varying perspectives, and I was very struck by the first point that was made across countries, which was how do we make sure that the institution of gender focal points doesn't become a girls' ghetto. I think that was very interestingly brought out, maybe alluded to in different ways by the different panelists, but I was really struck by the way they tried so many different ways in which to make sure that by having a sole responsibility for gender focal point, they also tried to mainstream the responsibilities throughout the system. And they did this by, for example, making themselves indispensable to national action plans for 1325. They also redefined the functions of the gender focal point to really link it more broadly to human rights functions and to make it sort of like linked to complaints mechanisms, to grievance redressal mechanisms, to ombudsman functions. So these were very, very important, I think, lessons for all of us who are trying to work on gender issues in large institutions and large bureaucracies. And it also was very interesting to see that they called, they tried to title the function differently by saying persons of trust or counselors or consultants, so that they didn't sort of narrow the role of the person who was trying to uphold gender equality in the system. And they had various levels of success, and I thought it was quite interesting that through all these different ways, they tried, what a key success was really raising the awareness of gender issues in very male bastions of military. And this is no mean achievement. I think whatever era or age we live in, and or no matter what region or country, this is a great achievement to actually have gender equality issues raised in the institution as a whole. They also tried to make it more normal to have women's equal participation with men in positions of competence and responsibility. It was also very interesting to see that 1325 has become something of a byword from the deafening silence that the NATO colleague got when it was first mentioned at a meeting. It's now something that people understand across the system. And also the importance that all the countries have placed on regional cooperation and learning between and among countries. This was actually extremely interesting to see that this partnership really opened up so many avenues for learning between them and to really advocate their case better and to strengthen gender equality mechanisms in their own countries. Also was very interesting to see that the gender equality mechanisms were not just seen as something that were just left there to be something separate from the system, but to really see the importance of leadership, and that it was very important for people to show and lead by example. So it was important for people for the leadership of the mechanisms to really confront head on some of the attitudes, the very entrenched attitudes of having people say that I don't really want to work with women, I don't want to have a woman as a boss. So those kinds of things which are still, I think, persistent attitudes in the system and outside. And I think it's very important to have this leadership point underlined, because it's not easy to have gender focal points or gender mechanisms to battle on an issue such as gender equality on their own. And I think that was extremely interesting to see. Challenges and next steps. Something that I thought emerged in all the speakers was, from all the speakers, was how to make sure that the gender equality in the security sector is not seen as something of a hothouse creation that is just separated from society and from the rooted attitudes, cultural or other attitudes in society. A lot of people talked about patriarchal notions and gender discrimination, and these are not by no means unique to this region, as we can attest from wherever we come from. And so here I thought the importance of enlisting media, the support of media and other kinds of institutions that have broad public influence was very important, and a few of speakers mentioned it. I would also mention something that maybe didn't come out that much, was to really look at civil society groups and women's organizations, because large bureaucracies don't do very well in engaging with civil society groups, and this goes for the UN as well. But I think it's extremely important for us to see women's groups in particular as allies for gender mechanisms within large systems, and that's something that perhaps we can look at in the next stage. Civic education, human rights norms, and conventions. This, I think, is a very important issue that is a bit of unfinished business, because it's not enough just to have the knowledge of 1325, but to really link it with and connect it very much with the women's rights, CEDAW, the Convention to End Discrimination Against Women, also to link it very much to refugee rights conventions and to child rights conventions. So the broader human rights context that is very important for us to remember and to promote. And lastly, I think the continuing task is the importance of data analysis, using data, generating disaggregated data, and learning to use it in gender analysis. I think that's something for the next phase. And to continue to look at organizational culture issues, to look at work-life balance, which was addressed with very moving personal stories in the third panel, but something also to look at going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharati. That's a very full summary of the second panel. And for the third panel, we have Nadia, who will talk a little bit more about the gender responsive human resource policies.
Hvala, Fiona. Jedno pravilo iz Murphyjevih zakona kaže da kada radiš na rješenju problema, mnogo je lakše ako znaš odgovor. I vjerujem da je to u stvari poruka ovog trećeg panela bila, jer ljudi koji se bave ljudskim resursima u oružanim snagama ove 4 države koje su učestvovale u projektu prepoznaju, znaju odgovore. Odgovore je da žene i muškarci u oružanim snagama treba da budu ravnopravni, da ne smiju da postoje barijere i da svi moraju imati jednak pristup tom sistemu, jer pitanje bezbjednosti nije pitanje muškaraca, već je to podjednako pitanje i muškaraca i žena, i mi smo u regionu u proteklom periodu pokazali da su žene itekako spremne da se bave pitanjem bezbjednosti, da odlučuju o svojoj sudbini, sudbini svoje porodice podjednako kao i muškarci. Ljudski resursi vide zaposlenika, bilo on muškarac ili žena, kao dragocjenost, vrijednost i svjesni su da ulažući u zaposlenike u stvari povećavaju njihovu vrijednost i da ih svakako kao važne resurse treba sačuvati u sistemu. Statistike pokazuju da u nekom određenom periodu žene napuštaju oružane snage i nismo baš dobili odgovor zbog čega je to tako, ali vjerujem da ga svi negdje slutimo. Ljudski resursi se angažuju i fokusiraju se na rast i razvoj pojedinačnih potencijala, bez obzira da li su to muškarci ili žene, ali svakako kroz ovaj projekat se htjelo učiniti vidljivim da je potrebno mnogo više angažmana uložiti u razvoj ženskih kapaciteta u ovom sistemu. I ono što jeste važno kao rezultat cjelokupnog projekta, a o tome se govorilo na prva dva panela, pa je samo na ovom trećem to potvrđeno, da se kroz projekat došlo do značajnog broja osoba i muškaraca i žena koji od ranije posjeduju znanja potrebna za rad u ovom sistemu, ali sada su i rodno osviješćeni i mogu ne samo da promovišu rodnu ravnopravnost, već i da čine promjene u cijelom tom sistemu. Prepoznato je da su predrasude u mnogome sprečavale razvoj ženskih potencijala u ovom sistemu, ali to su predrasude i u samom sistemu, ali i u društvu i da je neophodno i dalje raditi, iako je došlo do promjena, da je neophodno i dalje raditi na uklanjanju i stereotipa i predrasuda koje postoje. Ljudski resursi kroz obrazovanje, kroz transparentnost rade na tome, ali neophodno je dalje mnogo više raditi na ovom polju. Obrazovanje i znanje je u stvari jedini resurs koji kada se daje ne gubi se, nego se umnožava. I znači prepoznato je u ovom projektu da su svi nesebično dijelili znanja, da se to radilo kako na nivou država koje su učestvovale u projektu, tako i na regionalnom nivou i da je svima koji se bave ljudskim resursima u oružanim snagama značilo to što im je Nordijski centar omogućio da se upoznaju sa njihovim aktivnostima, ali što je UNDP SEESAC im omogućio da posjete države koje su bile dobar primjer i za njihov dalji rad. Ono što je prepoznato u radu ljudi koji se bave ljudskim resursima u oružanim snagama, to je da ponekad i nije bila namjera da se napravi diskriminacija, ali se prepoznaje to sljepilo za rod. Prosto nisu dovoljno rodno osjetljivi da bi prepoznavali sve zamke koje stoje u procesu orodnjavanja. U regionu postoji dobar zakonodavni okvir, svi primjenjuju i međunarodna dokumenta i to je bio dodatni vjetar u jedra u ovom procesu, ali postoji još dosta prostora u kome treba djelovati. Ono što je se kroz ovaj projekat pokazalo važnima, to je da treba i dalje raditi na edukacijama na svim nivoima, da se to mora raditi i horizontalno i vertikalno, da je kroz projekat, i ja sam imala tu sreću da učestvujem u tom segmentu projekta, pokušao se implementirati i projekat koji sprovodi Nordijski centar, a to je mentorstvo sa visoko pozicioniranim vojnim licima i to zaista daje rezultate jer rodno osvješćava ljude koji donose odluke, koji utiču na politiku cijelog sistema i važno je da oni razumiju ne samo ono osnovno šta je rod, već da znaju i da sprovedu rodnu analizu u svom radu. Takođe je jako važno nastaviti i edukaciju koju sprovode treneri koje smo dobili kroz ovaj proces i tako se na svim nivoima događa edukacija i osvješćivanje osoba zaposlenih u sistemu bezbjednosti, ali tako se i šalje jasna poruka cjelokupnoj javnosti da to nije zatvoren sistem, da je to sistem koji je otvoren za sve građanke i građane države u kojoj on djeluje. Pomenulo se i u prva dva panela i u ovom da je neophodno znači i dalje raditi na obrazovanju, da je neophodno sarađivati sa medijima koji imaju značajnu ulogu u ovom procesu, da je važan rad na lokalnom nivou, u lokalnim zajednicama je pravi život, u lokalnim zajednicama se osjeća sve ono što jeste rezultat politika koje se donose na državnom nivou i da je neophodno sarađivati sa organizacijama civilnog društva. I završavam. I sad nešto što sam ja postavila kao pitanje u drugom panelu, ali postavit ću ga i ovdje jer jeste vezano za ljudske resurse i namjerno nisam htjela da ga postavim u panelu da moji prijatelji iz Bosne ne kažu to je trebalo u drugom panelu, ne sad u trećem, pošto je na drugom bio takav odgovor. Ali znači sve dok ne postane normalno svaka procedura koja se dešava, a o tome je govorila gospođa Šurman i u uvodnom dijelu, znači sve dok ne postane normalno, sve dok onaj trenutak kad izbrišemo sve lavirinte i barijere i kada imamo odgovore na pitanje da li postoji uniforma za ženu koja je trudna, da li ta trudnoća utiče na razvoj njene karijere, da li na vojnim akademijama može da studira trudna studentkinja, da li u etičkom kodeksu postoji, da li se tretira pitanje da li neko ko je evidentiran kao nasilnik u porodici može da napreduje u vojnoj karijeri, da li sistem ima podršku za očeve, samohrane roditelje. Sve dok nemamo odgovore na takva pitanja, mi moramo da zajedno tražimo odgovore, a na pitanje, ima jedna dječja pjesma u našem regionu koja kaže šta je na kraju, početak eto šta je na kraju, tako da ja na kraju ovog projekta očekujem početak novog, jer znam da UNDP SEESAC također prepoznaje rezultate ovog projekta. Hvala vam.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the reference to the song. Well done. You summarized what was basically a 4-year project and also a 1.5-hour conversation. So now I'm going to pass over to Bojana, who's really done some thinking about what the key areas are that might want to be taken forward from what we've done so far.
Thank you very much. I have to start by, after all the thanks that we've heard in the previous panels to the SEESAC team, I first of all want to thank each and every one of you, our partners in the 4 ministries of defense, that we've worked so closely in the last 4 years, because it is thanks to your personal dedication and hard work that all of these results were actually achieved. We were there only to support you. It was already last year when in the regional meetings our partners, ministries of defense, actually started asking about what do we do after this project is over, what do we do in the next phase? And then we jointly, in 2 regional meetings, we discussed what would be the focus of the next phase of the project, and we actually developed a concept note together with the 4 ministries of defense, and this concept note was also endorsed by all of them at the end of last year. So I will just briefly go through what was proposed and what is agreed, what we would like to work on in the next phase. And I'm very happy to see that we're still very much in line with the discussions that took place here during the day. So first of all, we want to continue with regional cooperation and with regular meetings of gender equality mechanisms, ministries of defense on gender equality in the military. We want to support Human Resources Department to develop human resources policies that are based on gender disaggregated data and gender analysis, and that these human resources policies are able to address and respond to the somewhat different needs of women and men in the military, and then also ensure professional development for women and their career advancement. We also want to support and to strengthen capacities for processing internal complaints mechanisms, complaints on gender-based discrimination, sexual harassment and abuse. As we know, these are key for ensuring a healthy working environment, and that also enables the best utilization of human resources. We're also proposing to work in the next phase on improved integration of women through gender sensitization. So we plan to continue working with the regional network of gender trainers to strengthen their capacities to develop and deliver gender briefings, trainings. But what is also very important is to mainstream gender into military training and into military education. It is not enough that military education opened up for women. We need to make sure that this education is also free from gender stereotypes and bias. And we would also like to continue with the gender coach program that we have successfully piloted in Montenegro in this first phase of the project. We're also proposing, considering the participation in this conference today, to explore the possibilities to include new countries and new ministries of defense and armed forces into the project. For example, Albania, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Ukraine, Turkey that are present here today, but also others from outside the region. I hope that this is not the end, this is actually a new beginning. And I would also like to ask if there are any comments from our colleagues, partners, who would like to add anything to this short summary of the next phase.
I think we have, I'm conscious of the time, but I'm sure there's about 5 minutes or so where we could have some questions from the floor, some clarifications or points that you'd like further details on from Bojana or the team. Is there anyone that would like to ask a question about some of the titles or some of the indicative activities that she's identified as being important to keep going? Thank you.
It's not a question, it's a comment. I hope that when you finish the second phase, the panel will be gender balanced.
I think that's an excellent point. And at the back there.
Dobar dan, mnogi me znaju, Biljana Stojković, Ministarstvo odbrane Republike Srbije. Ja sam inače bila koordinatorka izrade prvog nacionalnog akcionog plana, sada sam takođe koordinatorka izrade drugog nacionalnog akcionog plana za primjenu rezolucije 1325. Inače sam rukovodilac ove sjajne analitičke grupe o kojoj je bilo reči sa 22 člana iz različitih organizacijnih jedinica, 18 organizacijnih jedinica i Ministarstva odbrane i Vojske Srbije, a koliko vidimo ovde u publici sede 6 članica, uključujući i radno predsjedništvo te analitičke grupe i ja sam naravno na nju posebno ponosna. Takođe sam i sekretar političkog saveta vlade koji se brine o sprovođenju rezolucije 1325, koga čine sve sami državni sekretari i pomoćnici ministara i kojim presedava ministar odbrane. Dakle, od samih početaka i kad je bio prvi panel u Beogradu i početak ovog projekta imala sam prilike da zajedno sa ostalim predstavnicima ministarstava odbrane iz regiona učestvujem u debati šta će biti kad će biti, a sada smo u situaciji da razmišljamo šta dalje. Znači, ključna reč po meni je održivost ovog projekta. Održivo se može, mislim da je jedan od panelista u prošlom panelu potencirao iz Norveške upravo to da je izgradnja institucija najsigurnija garancija za održivost onoga što je bilo predmet rada u proteklih 4 godine. U tom smislu ja bih sugerisala da, pored onoga što je jedna od sadašnjih panelistkinja ukazala na bolju integraciju faktički svih struktura koji brinu o bezbednosti i odbrani, da vodimo računa i o nekim posebnim potrebama. Jedna je od koleginica iz Makedonije pomenula izazove, rizike i pretnje koje nosi savremeno dobu, uključujući i migrantsku krizu. Druga je ukazala na delotvorni učinak saradnje institucija bezbednosti, posebno ministarstava odbrane sa nevladinim sektorom. Ja moram da vam kažem da mi u novom nacionalnom akcionom planu u radnoj grupi koja ima 31 člana imamo ravnopravne učesnike u kreiranju NAP-a po prvi put, možda i u regionu, iz nevladinog sektora, nezavisne ekspertkinje i eksperte, profesore sa privatnih i državnih fakulteta i istraživačkih institucija. Oni sada više nisu nezavisni monitoring na sprovođenje plana, oni su kreatori i sutra će biti realizatori. Zaista smo otišli korak dalje i ključna reč u narednih 5 godina biće lokalizacija. Znači, spuštamo NAP na teren. U javnoj raspravi išli smo u 5 gradova u unutrašnjosti Srbije, oslušali šta misle građani i građanke u Republici Srbiji po pitanju njihove bezbednosti, koji su rizici, koji su opasnosti, šta treba da uradimo, šta da uvrstimo od tih aktivnosti u taj plan i mislim da će to dati jedan kvalitet više. S te strane ja zaista podržavam inicijativu gotovo nepodeljenu svih panelista da ovaj projekat treba da bude nastavljen, ali naravno vodite računa o tome kako ćete ga održati, odnosno o nekim institucijama koje neće biti paralelni mehanizmi, već postojećim institucijama u ministarstvima odbrane, naprotiv, koji će biti integrisani u postojeću strukturu i dati joj kvalitet više. To je ono što se zove urodnjavanje. Hvala.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know, Bojana, is there anything you want to mention in terms of that? No. Okay. Thank you very much for that very practical introduction on behalf of Serbia. Is there any further points? If not, I'd like to turn over to Mariette, and maybe in reflecting on your keynote speech this morning, where you made some very practical suggestions as to what you would like to see as the outcomes of today and also for the project overall, perhaps you'd like to reflect on whether we've achieved any of that or maybe all of it.
Well, maybe I should start with myself. For sure, I learned a lot of the practical examples and best practices that came throughout the 3 panels. As I said in my opening remarks, I think really the challenge is to make sure that gender equality becomes the new normal, and that is not only because we have to lead by example, but because it's a matter of effectiveness, efficiency, and excellence. So how do we make sure that we tap into all the talent that our societies have to offer and provide equal opportunities for people to excel, also in the field of security and protecting our nations. And I think reflecting and also on what the 3 panelists here came with their takeaways from today, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is really the discussions today underline that this is a common challenge. As I said in the beginning, I can assure you the Western Balkans does not have a monopoly on patriarchal societies and on male-dominated working environments. And I sometimes they hate me for doing this in Brussels, but they still do it. Sometimes I quote actually one of the military representatives that shared with me when I started this job, his first impression when he entered a meeting of military representatives in NATO, and he looked around and he thought, 50 shades of grey. So if even male colleagues are struck by the lack of diversity, not only on the basis of gender, but also many other aspects, that is how, let's say, pertinent that is. So how do we move away from 50 shades of grey versus pink ghettos, right? And so that is a common challenge. And I think what today's discussions really bring about is that this regional cooperation and international cooperation in sharing best practices in ways of, in practical terms, how to tackle this challenge, what works to really arrive at gender equality and inclusive and lasting peace and security, which is the end goal of this whole exercise. I think that's really valuable. So the regional cooperation, sharing best practices, that's also started through this project and will continue, I think is a key asset of this approach, and I really congratulate everybody that committed to this joint effort. Some other things that are re-emphasized throughout today is the importance of gender analysis and gender disaggregated, gender-sensitive language as basic tools. As I always say, gender analysis or gender perspectives is not rocket science, it's a matter of asking a different set of questions, right? So it's how we define security and trying to have a more inclusive approach and understanding of what security is. I always like the title of the publication of the Nordic Center, whose security? That's a basic question for every security provider to ask himself. And I think many examples were given today also on how to do that. So gender analysis and gender-sensitive language as a starting point to increase the awareness that gender matters also when it comes to lasting peace and security. Institutional cultural change that came about is obviously key, that, to change the perceptions and how we define security in a more inclusive manner in order to find these more comprehensive answers that address root causes of conflict. And then the aspect that many already mentioned, the key importance to bring about this cultural organizational change of leadership, inclusive leadership. And maybe one footnote I would like to make, because I was challenged by the Bosnian colleague who referred to the Netherlands. Now, I happen to be Dutch, and I think it's the most brilliant example of why setting targets would help, because the Netherlands didn't do it, and we're actually regressing. After having been about one of the first countries in Europe to open the military for women in 1944, after Denmark, 1934. But actually, we are at this very average of 9%, and we're going down. So sometimes setting targets, I'm not talking about quota, but setting realistic but ambitious targets just helps us to stay focused, to analyze what the barriers are, and to address them with evidence-based targeted measures. And we know from the allies that do that actually they can move from this very, very slow progress of, as on average, we increased by 3% over 15 years, the participation of women in the armed forces. But with these targets and targeted measures, you can speed it up at least 3 times. That's what we know. So I'm a fan of, I have become a convert, I'm a fan of targets. And I see it as actually a leadership tool. It helps leaders to, as I said, to be ambitious, to give expression to their recognition, and that is the basis, that gender equality is fundamental and a matter of excellence. So that we really try to find practical ways in which we make sure that we provide equal opportunities for people, men and women, professionals, good soldiers, to excel, so that it doesn't matter if we're a man or a woman, but it only matters that we're a good soldier, and that's what we all want to be. So to end, I think, I said, the end state would be that gender equality is the new normal. I hope in the next 15 years we will get there. And as I said, not as a matter of a political correctness, but as a conviction that it's a matter, that it will make us more secure and more effective, and it's a matter of professionality and excellence. And actually would like to refer to the UNDP quote that makes the point on why that matters, because it is about empowering men, women, boys, and girls, and that will create resilient nations. And that is our job. That's what we want to achieve.
So after those very thoughtful words, and thank you so much for doing that for us, I want to extend the thanks. It's my job to thank the delegations of the Ministry of Defense, of Bosnia and Herzegovina, of Montenegro, of the Republic of Serbia, and of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia for their really committed work and cooperation on this project. And also to thank their Ministers of Defense for the support and the leadership that they've shown in this regional initiative. That's one set of thanks, and really important ones. And also to thank the people that have made this work possible, the donors. And here we have the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Swedish Armed Forces. Representatives of both are here, and we thank you for the support and guidance and involvement you've had in this project throughout. Thanks to the SEESAC team, I'm going to pass over to Shelley Inglis to do. She has familiar with all of the members and who did what. So please, can we have a microphone over here, please?
Okay, great. So I think the SEESAC team is going to line up in the back, and I'm not going to name them by name, but I would really like everybody to express their appreciation to the fantastic team for this project and also this closing conference. So please.
And I'd like to say that you're not allowed to leave the room, and I find very frightened to say that to military people, until we all have a photograph. So if you please join me on the stage, and we can all have a photograph to mark this occasion. Thank you.